Hi everybody, Josh Lloyd here to give you the NBA first look for DraftKings for Friday. Hit the subscribe button while you're here, hit that bell as well, and you'll be part of the group, the exclusive group, to get the notifications when these videos first go out. Do that right now. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Go on, hit it, hit the bell. Yeah, there we go. All right, let's go on to talking about Friday. There are 10 games on in the NBA. The first one of those games is the Phoenix Suns going to take on the Detroit Pistons. The Suns are 6.5-point favorites. The total here is 218.5. The Suns have been one of the best teams in the NBA. The Pistons have not been one of the best teams in the NBA. 6.5-point spread seems low, so let's see what Phoenix does. No Killian Hayes, obviously, for Detroit. Derrick Rose is probable, as is Josh Jackson, so we'll see what that means in terms of the rotation. Mason Plumlee's minutes have been going down, so it's hard to get too excited about Plumlee, but at 5,200, if he can get 26 minutes, 27 minutes, he'll beat that number. He just hasn't been. I don't mind using him in a GPP. I also think Josh Jackson at 5,300 looks pretty good, assuming that he's ready to go and there's no minutes restriction. I doubt there would be. He's just coming back from an ankle sprain, so he should be a 25-plus point performer. Chris Paul's at 7,100, and while he hasn't been blowing us away, that is a really cheap price for Chris Paul, so I don't think we should completely move on from that one. Well, Jeremy Grant, what a surprise he's been this year. $7,000. Averaging 39 fantasy points, over 40 in each of the last two games. No reason, I don't think, to steer clear of him. The Pistons point guard scenario is a little bit up in the air. Delon Wright started last game but struggled. I wouldn't mind using Derrick Rose at 5,800 just because he's going to get a lot of usage and he's going to get a lot of ball handling opportunities, playing maybe a couple of extra minutes at point guard. So I think he is an option for us here in this one as well. The next game, we take a look at the Oklahoma City Chargers. The Oklahoma City Thunder, that's the name of the team. They are taking on the New York Knicks. Taj Gibson's New York Knicks, of course. The Knicks are favorite by 2.5 points. Both of these teams have been pretty feisty this season. So maybe it's going to be an interesting game. But the Knicks have been good. The Thunder have been feisty. Maybe that's a fairer way of describing this. The Knicks 2.5-point favorites, as I said, but a really low total, 208.5 points. Alec Burks remains out. Reggie Bullock is probable. Nerlens Noel is questionable, while Kevin Knox is probable for the Knicks. Gilgeous-Alexander's at 7,800. That looks pretty good to me. We saw it last game. Big assist numbers for Shea. Big steal numbers for Shea. Resulted in almost a 51-point fantasy performance, which is awesome at his price of 7,800. RJ Barrett is very hit or miss. It makes it very hard to trust him in cash. But he gets the minutes, he gets the opportunities, he could have 20 points, he could have 50 points, as you've seen in each of the last two games. I don't mind using RJ against the Thunder defense, which isn't great. Well, Julius Randle is all the way up at 9,800. Is that a little bit too high? It might be, but I think that Randle's floor is relatively safe. Mitch Robinson at 5,700. He played 41 minutes last game. I don't think we'd ever see a day where we can rely upon Mitch Robinson to play 41 minutes, but it happened, and he was great. And he's averaging over 33 DraftKings points in his last three games. I'm a little bit hesitant to use him, but I don't think it's a complete disaster. Alfred Payton, I would like it more if he was at less than 6,500, but his minutes and his production have been up, while Austin Rivers also just quietly going about putting up some good numbers. And with Burks out, Rivers is getting trusted quite a bit. He had, 36 last game, 24 average over the last three, 30-plus minutes in each of the last two games. A pretty solid matchup. I don't mind Alfred Payton going into a GPP setup just because of the trust that Tom Thibodeau apparently has in him. And that's what we need at this point. You need a coach that's going to just pump the minutes into him, and that is exactly what Tibbs is doing at this point. Next up is the Hornets, and it is the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans are favored by 6. The total here is 217. JJ Redick is questionable. LaMelo Ball versus Lonzo Ball. I think they're actually probably two of the best plays on the board. LaMelo at 65. Lonzo, well, that was Eric Bledsoe. Lonzo at 64. I think they're both really, really strong options. LaMelo, even in limited minutes, is lowest score LaMelo Ball in the last 5 games, 32 DraftKings points. Love him here. Lonzo's at 64. I also think that's pretty good. It's not as good as LaMelo, but I think it's pretty good. Ingram at 8,500 looks great to me, as does Gordon Hayward, although Hayward is at 8,400, but he is just putting up absolute monster performances game after game. I think we've got to look at Zion Williamson, 7,900 for Zion. 43, 34, 37. They're not bad numbers. I think he can do better as well. If we look at his last few games, 43, 43, 32. Yeah, getting that 40 points out of Zion is not a complete, aberration to get 40 points out of him. I think there is value in using him. Not keen on Rozier really, or Graham, or Eric Bledsoe even. Paul Washington Jr. at 5,700. I think he's going to get opportunities to beat that number, so I like that one. There is a little bit of value in Washington at that sort of salary. Next up is the Wizards and the Celtics. Now, we've got some unknowns there with Boston because Tristan Thompson and Robbie Williams are both listed as questionable due to health and safety protocols. So that's obviously one that we need to pay attention to in terms of who's going to actually play. Because if they're both out, then you're looking at big minutes for Grant Williams, but especially for Daniel Tice. Jeff Teague also questionable. Russell Westbrook with that dislocated finger is questionable also. Grant Williams, another one who's questionable. So maybe Shemi Ojeleye is the guy that gets the bump there in minutes. Marcus Smart's at 6,300. I don't love that, but I do like Jason Tatum at 9,200. Tatum's been putting up pretty strong numbers over the last bit of time. 43, 57, 60, and 43 in his last 4 games. So at 9,200, I think it's a pretty strong floor. Davis Bertans is getting good minutes. He started the second half last game. He's at 4,900. There is value in him, while Tice at 43 could turn out to be one of the best values on the board under the assumption that Thompson and or Williams are sidelined. That's Robert Williams or even Grant Williams. Jaylen Brown's up at 8,700, and even last game he shot poorly, but absolutely smashed his number, which is great. I'm still a little hesitant about using him. I probably shouldn't be, but I still am. Jaylen Brown. Bradley Beal, 9,700. He dropped just an 80 last time against the Sixers. Can he do that again? I don't know. It is... I have some skepticism, but he's averaging 52 points per game this year. 70 or 80 points, 55, 48 in the last 3 games, but up at 9,700. There is bust potential, I think, because of how high that salary has become. So I'm a little cautious on it. I'm not all that keen on using Russell Westbrook here in this matchup. The next one we look at is the Utah Jazz. They are taking on the Milwaukee Bucks. It's been a rough couple of games for the Jazz, losing to the Knicks and the Nets in a back-to-back in New York, and now they get the good fortune of taking on the Bucks. The Bucks are 6-point favorites, and the total is 231.5, so one of the biggest totals of the day. Dante DiVincenzo's at 5,000, struggling at the moment. I'm not really sure I love him here. I'd much prefer to use someone like Rudy Gobert at 7,500, who's got a rock-solid floor. Probably limited upside, but a rock-solid floor. And Brook Lopez, who's playing much better of late. Lopez at 4,600. He was quite good last game with 36 points, and Yanni's at 10.9. He's always going to be a strong option, especially now that the shots are starting to go in at a little bit of a higher rate. Chris Middleton's at 8,000 and Don Mitchell at 76. I think both of those guys are probably priced just a little bit too high, while Punch Bob Bobby Portis, 5,300 for Bob. He's getting backup power forward minutes, backup center minutes. If there's any blowout potential, he'll play more. He's got 41 last game. He's averaging 28 over his last 5 at 5,300. It's actually a pretty safe floor play, which is an amazing thing for me to say about Bobby Portis, but here we are. That's what happens in 2021, I guess. The next game is the Orlando Magic. They're taking on the Houston Rockets. The old 90s finals rematch. The Rockets 5.5-point favorites in the total 227. Christian Wood is questionable, as is Evan Fournier. We don't have Markelle Fultz, of course, out with that torn ACL, so Cole Anthony will get a start. Now, his salary has bumped up, Anthony, up to 5,000. I still think that he is a relatively viable option at that salary. There is some bust potential, considering they did bump him up there, but given what he's been able to do so far, look, he's had a couple of 23-plus performances. In the extra minutes, I do think that he is a chance to beat that number. I wouldn't be just locking him into every lineup, but I think he's got good value. 79 for Christian Wood is all right. I don't mind it. James Harden's at 11. I'd rather spend the money on Yanni at this point. Harden's usage is a little bit down, weirdly enough. He's still getting a lot of assists, but his usage is lower than we would hope for and lower than we would expect. Johnny Wall's at 8,000. I like that. Actually, the way that Wall's playing, the floor there is, I think, relatively safe. So I think John Wall has some pretty strong value. I wouldn't be going with guys like Cousins. Terrence Ross is probably priced a little bit too high. Well, David Nwaba will likely start in place of Daniel House. But he had a really big game last time, Nwaba. I just don't trust it. And nor do I trust the production from Aaron Gordon. Although, Gordon's been giving us 30-plus in the last couple of games. He'll get some extra usage with Fultz out. Is it enough to get me interested? Probably not really. The next game is the Brooklyn Nets, and it is the Memphis Grizzlies. Both teams on a back-to-back. Will Kyrie Irving play? We don't think Kevin Durant's going to play, but will Irving play after sitting out Thursday? We don't know. There is a question mark there. Of course, if he is out, Karis LeVert at 7,400 becomes probably the best play on the board, or the one that everyone's going to be using anyway. Bruce Brown's at 4,000. He's a bit of a hit-or-miss GPP type of a guy in this scenario, while D'Anthony Melton at 34. I think Melton's been pretty impressive for the Grizzlies, but their wing and guard rotation is a little bit of a mess at the moment. Valanciunas at 7,200. I do like it. I wouldn't say it's one that I'm 100% in favor with, but I do like it. And I think using Jarrett Allen is a little bit risky given how, up and down, I guess, the Nets center rotation can be. I always like looking at Desmond Bane as a sub 4,000 flyer type GPP guy. I'm just really impressed with how he looks when he's on the court, and I think at some point we're going to see some decent numbers coming through from Desmond Bane. Next up, we've got the Chicago Bulls. They're taking on the Los Angeles Lakers. It is a back-to-back for the Lakers. We don't know if Anthony Davis or LeBron are going to play. I would think there's a risk of Davis not playing. They were both questionable before Thursday, and they both did play, though. Wendell Carter Jr. is at 5,800. He had 39 DraftKings points last game. He's starting to come around. I wouldn't be super into him, but I think he's worth looking at. While Davis has a history of destroying the Bulls, as does LeBron, I'd feel a bit more comfortable using LeBron at 10-3. Levine's up at 8,600, which is a pretty high price for Zach LaVine, I'm not going to lie. But is he worth it? Maybe. He's averaging 48 over the last 3. I'm not against it, although the Lakers' defense is one that probably gives you a little bit of pause. Kobe White's up at 7,300 because, again, he's been putting up some absolute monsters as well. White's last 3 games, 52, 43, and 38. And at 7,300, that's some really good value. It was great value when he was down at 6,000 odd, but he has bumped up a little bit now. I don't mind using him. Garrett Temple's been getting a lot of minutes, but he doesn't really produce much in the fantasy stats type area, which, of course, when we're talking about a competition that requires fantasy stats, that's pretty important. The next game we look at is the Raptors. They are taking on the Sacramento Kings. In Sacramento, De'Aaron Fox is questionable, as is Rashawn Holmes. Tyrese Halliburton's going to be a massive play here. Halliburton is at 5,400. I would be in on that pretty much no matter what happens. If one of those guys is out, I'm super in on it. If 2 of them are out, I'm massively in on it. Fox is at 83. I'd fade that. Harrison Barnes at 6,000 is fine for cash, but really not too much more than that. There's very little upside there. And I think if we do get Holmes out, I reckon they might start Bagley at the 5, assuming Fox plays, and push Halliburton in and Barnes to the 4. But they would also give an opportunity for Hassan Whiteside, who has sucked all season and has barely played. But at 3,200, you're going to use him. Because if he gets 20 minutes, he'll beat that number relatively comfortably. I think Bagley would also become a pretty strong option if Holmes happens to be sidelined, although he is up at 5,900. I'm not going to just commit everything to it, but I think there is some value there. On the Raptors side, we know they're going to play a lot, and Lowry's probably going to push 240 DraftKings points. So at 7,900, he's worth it. So is Van Vliet at 8,100. Value in both of those blokes. Let us go now on to the last game of the day. It is the Clippers. They are taking on the Golden State Warriors. In San Francisco, the Clippers are 4.5 point favorites, and the total is 232. Completely clean injury report for the Clippers, while Steph Curry is questionable for the Warriors after spraining his ankle late. Draymond's at 5,100. I like him as a sneaky GPP guy. I don't think many people will be on Draymond. He's not really doing much, but I think there's sneaky value there. Pat Beverley's minutes have been pushing up. He's averaging 28 DraftKings points over the last 3 games, and that is marginally interesting to me. And if you want to have a look at some other guys, James Wiseman at 46, I'm not into that. Oubre at 54, not really into that. Marcus Morris off the bench at 45, I'm not into that. I am into Kawhi Leonard at 9,300. Leonard played on that back-to-back against the Warriors last time out and only had 33 points, and his last few games have been a little bit down, but we know this is a 50-point potential sort of player, a 60-point upside player, who at 9,300 I think is returning us good value, while Paul George is at 9,100. Last game wasn't great for George, but he's still averaging 48 over his last 5, and at 9,100, really hard to find too many better bets out there on the board. That'll do it. Looking at a 10-game slate in the NBA. DraftKings first look. I mentioned it before, but do it again. Subscribe. Hit the thumbs up. And also hit the bell for notifications. Leave your comments down below, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. See ya.